Everybody knows the term Greater Seattle, but what a lot of people have forgotten that there was at one time a Lesser Seattle. And today we're going to learn about when in Seattle lesser was more. After World War II, local boosters were looking to put Seattle on the map and also make Seattle a much bigger deal, the central city of Puget Sound. So they came up with an organization and a tagline called Greater Seattle. And as part of that, they created events like Seafair. It was a Chamber of Commerce type organization that was constantly tooting Seattle's horn. But every action in Seattle creates an opposite reaction. And by the late 1950s, there were people who were tired of this ceaseless boosterism. And so an organization, informal organization, was launched called Lesser Seattle Unincorporated. Lesser Seattle was really driven by a lot of people who didn't like this sort of boosterish promotional bombast about how great Seattle was. They wanted to pop the balloons of those people who talked in big terms. They wanted Seattle to stay its kind of isolated, cozy self. People didn't like all the Californians moving in. They didn't like tourists coming to town. They wanted Seattle basically to stay the small provincial town in the Pacific Northwest that it had been. The unofficial leader of Lesser Seattle was a newspaper columnist named Emmett Watson. Emmett Watson was a local, born and raised in the area. He went to local high schools. One of the reasons I'm wearing this jacket. Emmett Watson was a member of the Seattle Rainiers, which was our Pacific Coast League baseball team. He said he couldn't hit a curveball, but you know, he was a Rainier, and in old Seattle, the Rainiers were, you know, bigger than the Mariners and the Seahawks combined. Emmett Watson, in his newspaper column, embraced the idea of Lesser Seattle. He encouraged people to be rude to tourists. He developed a slogan, KBO, keep the bastards out. And that was particularly aimed at people from California who were moving up here. Emmett Watson in his day was the must-read columnist, and he actually at one time or another wrote for all three of Seattle's great daily newspapers, the Star, the Seattle PI, and the Seattle Times. Watson believed in Lesser Seattle, but only to a point. Part of it was tongue-in-cheek. Part of it was really just to get at the ego, the civic ego that he felt. Emmett Watson promoted the rain. He wanted other people to promote the rain. He didn't want any good publicity about the city to get out. He would praise countries like Liechtenstein, which he claimed was a very progressive country, yet it didn't grow. Emmett Watson was not just a civic grump. He had a great sense of humor. His column was a blog before blogs were invented. He did the typical daily three-dot journalism, kept you in touch with what was happening in town. A lot of people haven't heard about Lesser Seattle because it's kind of died. Lesser Seattle was overtaken by change, by time, by growth. Seattle developed world-class city ambitions, which Emmett Watson would never have approved of. If you read Emmett Watson's memoirs, you can see that he drew on his experience as a Seattle native. His name was on an oyster bar in the Pike Place Market. What gets more Northwesty than an Emmett Watson in an oyster bar, cozy, secluded corner of the Pike Place Market near the old Starbucks?